Hello, welcome back. Today we will be learning how to compare and order real numbers. Go ahead and add into your table of contents, comparing and ordering real numbers. You should be around page 19 to 20. If you ever need more pages than what I'm allotting, feel free to go further on. Just make sure your page numbers are ordered appropriately. This will be our last lesson for the real number system. Okay, so we are almost finished with Unit 1. Our objective for today is to compare and order rational numbers. And our essential question is how to compare and order rational numbers. This should be page 19. Remember to pause the video at any time you need to finish writing. Okay, so we're going to begin by just comparing rational numbers using less than, greater than, or equal to. What you need to do first is to always write the numbers as a decimal. That doesn't have to be a decimal. They can both be fractions or they can both be percents, but writing it as a decimal is the easiest. So it's best to change everything to a decimal. So we've already learned how to convert all of these. So for 4/9, I need to divide 4 divided by 9. And when I do that, I get 0 and 4 repeating. Okay, you can just do that in your calculator. To change 45% to a decimal, remember we moved that decimal place 2 places, so this becomes 0 and 45 hundredths. Now, we always want to make sure that we have the same number of digits behind the decimal when we're comparing. So I need to come over here and add another 4. Okay, so now I have 0 and 44 hundredths compared to 0 and 45 hundredths. So that means that 0 and 45 hundredths is greater than 0 and 44 hundredths. So my sign would be, the greater sign would be facing the 45%. Okay, number 2, I have them as both fractions, so I need to change that. So -3 divided by 2 would give me -1 and 5/10. -5 divided by 6 would give me -0 and 83 repeating. Again, I want to make sure that I have the same number of digits behind the decimal place here. So I'm going to add a 0. Now, -1 and 50 hundredths and -83 hundredths. I'm comparing. This one can sometimes be a little bit challenging because when we look at this, we want to say 1 and 50 hundredths is greater than 83 hundredths, but that's not true. This is actually further from 0, so -1 and 50 is further away from 0. So -0 and 83 hundredths would be greater. Okay, so be careful with that. When we're dealing with negatives, we want to think the one that's closer to 0 is going to be greater. Let's take a look at number 3. I need to change 60% to a decimal, so this would be 0 and 60 hundredths because I'm going to move it 2 places. I have to divide. 1 divided by 4 gives me 0 and 25 hundredths. So when I look at this one, 60% is greater than 1/4. Okay, and my last one here. The first one we don't actually need to change. It's already done for us. And then I need to divide -2 divided by 3. And that's going to give me a 6 repeating. I need to make sure I have the same number of digits, so I'm going to add that there so I have the same here. So then we can see, we have to ask ourselves which one is closer to 0. So that's actually going to be -0 and 175 thousandths. I know that one looks smaller, but it's actually closer to 0. Okay, let's take a look at ordering rational numbers. So we still want to follow the same thing. We want to make sure we write everything as a decimal, or everything as a fraction, or everything as a percent. And decimals just tend to be the easiest. And then we need to make sure we pay close attention to the directions. So as I read this, it says 2/5, 0 and 400ths, 420%, and 4 in order from least to greatest. It's always important to highlight that part. Find the part where it's actually in the directions, because sometimes it might be greatest to least, and we tend to think it's only going to be least to greatest, so we just start ordering them without really reading the directions. So now I want to make sure I write them all as a decimal. So what I like to do is to line them up vertically. So 2/5, 0 and 400ths, 420%, and then 4. And now I'm going to convert them all to a decimal. So 2/5, I need to divide. So 2 divided by 5 is 0.4. Okay, 0 and 400ths is always done for us. Now watch how I line these up. I'm going to line up the digits, almost like if I were adding them vertically. Okay, 420%. I need to move that decimal place 2 places, so this would be 4 and 20 hundredths. And then 4 is already done for us. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is make sure I have the same number of digits for each of these. So that means I need 2 digits behind. So if I don't have 2 digits, I'm going to add a 0. Now I can easily compare them. So what we kind of look at here is we look at the ones. We look at the tenths. And then we also look at the hundredths. Okay, so I just need to put them in order now. So I'm looking for the smallest one. So I know it's not going to be 4 and 20 hundredths or 4, because those have whole numbers. And then I notice, okay, I see a 0 here. That's going to be smaller than the 4 in the tens place. So my smallest number is going to be 0 and 400ths. And we always write the original. So the original was 0 and 400ths. Now, once I've done that, I'm going to cross that off because I've used that one. So now I'm going to compare another one. So I'm looking for my next smallest number. Well, again, I'm coming up to this 0 here in the 1, so that's 2/5. I got to go back to the original. I've used that, so I'm going to cross it off. Okay, now I'm looking for the next one. So 4 is going to be smaller than 4 and 20 hundredths. So my next number will be 4. I'm making sure I'm writing the original number. I'm going to cross it off. Then my last one is 420%. So in order from least to greatest, okay, let's look at another example. Again, the most important thing here is to read the directions first. It says order -4/9, 2.7825, the square root of 4, 0, the square root of 2, -1,895, and the square root of 16 in order from greatest to least. Okay, that's important. So this time I'm going in the opposite direction. So I always highlight that, circle it, whatever you need to. And then I'm going to start by writing the numbers vertically. So I've got -4/9, 2, 7,825 10,000ths, the square root of 4, 0, square root of 2, -1,895, and then the square root of 16. And I want to convert them all to decimals first. Okay, so I need to divide -4 divided by 9 is going to give me -0 and 4 repeating. Okay, this one is already done for us. So I've got 2, 7, 8, 2, 5. The square root of 4. Okay, the square root of 4 is a perfect square. 2 times 2 is 4. So that means this will change to just 2. 0 will remain the same. The square root of 2. Now this one is not a perfect square. And there is a way to calculate that on your calculator. What you can do is you're going to hit the second button. And you're going to find the button that says x squared. And right above it, you're going to see the square root button. So you're going to type in 2 and then close the parentheses and hit enter. And it's going to give you a decimal of 1.4142. And I'm only going 4 places because remember that's an irrational number. But since I already have a number that's got 4 digits behind the decimal, I'm going to stop there. Okay. Now I have -1,895. And then the square root of 16 is another perfect square. So 4 times 4 is 16. So this is going to change to 4. So now I need to go through and make sure they all have the same number of digits behind the decimal. So I'm going to add them in. So this was a 4 repeating. So I need to add 3 more 4s. So whole number 2. So I'm going to add zeros here. I'm going to add zeros here, here, and here. So now I have the same number of digits. So I'm actually looking for my largest number first. So when I do that, I'm going to look at just the ones place. So which one is my largest number? And I see 4 right here. So 4 is my largest. So the original for that is the square root of 16. So I'm going to start with the square root of 16. And I'm going to mark it off because I've used that. So now I'm looking for my next largest. So my next largest number, I see 2 2s, so now I've got to go to the tens place, okay, because these are the same here. So now I'm going to look over in the tens place. Okay, and since they're lined up, should be pretty easy to tell. So 7 is going to be greater than 0 when I look at these. So my next largest number is 2, 7,825 10,000s. I got to make sure I use that original. Okay, so my next largest is going to be 2. Okay, right here, when I look at that, that was the square root of 4. So now I'm going to cross that one off. Okay, so I'm still looking at my next largest, so I'm going back to the ones place. So I see 0, 0. Now I see a 1 right here. So that means my next largest number is going to be the square root of 2. So I'm going to cross this one off. Okay, after that, I'm looking, so I have a negative, 0, and then another negative. So 0 will be my next number. So I'm going to put 0 here. And then my next smallest after that is going to be negative 4/9. So I'm going to cross that one off. And then my last, or my smallest number, is negative 1,895. So there are all those numbers in order from least, or from greatest to least. Okay, that's why it's important to highlight that portion. Okay, at this time, I want you to pause the video and try this one on your own. So it says order 3 1/5, square root of 14, pi, the square root of 36 over 2, and 11 over 3, in order from least to greatest. Hopefully at this time you paused the video and you worked this problem out. So the first thing we want to do is highlight that this is going to be from least to greatest. Okay, and then we're going to line up these numbers. So I've got 3 1/5, the square root of 14, pi, square root of 36 over 2, and 11/3. So I'm going to convert them all to decimals. So 3 1/5, you divide 1 divided by 5, it should give you 3.2. Okay, that whole number 3 just goes out in front. The square root of 14, that's not a perfect square. So you are using the square root button in your calculator to convert that. And you should find it gives you 3.74. There will be other numbers too, but we're going to stop there. Pi, we're going to convert to 3.14. The square root of 36 over 2. 36 is a perfect square. So the square root of 36 is 6, because 6 times 6 is 36, over 2. So I just have to divide those. So 6 divided by 2 is 3. And then 11/3 will convert to 3 and 6 repeating. So now I need to make sure they all have the same number of digits. So I need to add those in. So I'm going to add a 0 here. I'm going to add 2 zeros, and then this was a repeating 6, so I need to add a 6. So now I can write these from least to greatest. So I got to find my small one. So when I look here, all my whole numbers are 3s. So I don't really need to worry too much about that. So I'm going to look at my 10s. And then I'll look at the hundreds. Okay, So when I look here, 0 is my smallest tenth right here. So that means the square root of 36 over 2 is going to be my smallest number. So right here. So that's where I'm looking. And I have to write the original. So I'm going to cross that one off. I've used it. Okay, so my next smallest, I see a 1 here in the tens place. So that's going to be pi. Remember, always use the original numbers. You'll get it wrong if you put your decimals in order. Okay, so my next smallest I see is the 2 up here. So my next smallest is going to be 3 1/5. Okay, and then my next smallest number I see is 6. So that's going to be 11 thirds. And then my last one is the square root of 14. So in order from least to greatest, hopefully you did well with that. At this time, you may move on to your assignment for today.